Hello and welcome to the class. My name is Daniel, and today we're going to be looking at fluency and coherence and pronunciation of the speaking marking criteria. Now, if you have a question after class, you can go to the top of the screen and click on the chat icon to send us a message. This is the first of two classes and will last just over 20 minutes. First, we're going to talk about fluency and coherence, and then we're going to have some tips to see how we can improve this in our speaking. So by the end of the session, you'll be more aware of how this affects your speaking marks. During the class, there'll be questions for you to answer. These will appear below the video, and I'll tell you when to answer them, and I'll give you 10 to 15 seconds for each one. So what is fluency and coherence? Well, we're going to have a look at the marking criteria that the examiner uses to mark you on this so we can understand it. So this is what it looks like. Now, it goes from, you can see here it's going from 6 to 9. Well, actually it goes from 0 to 9. 0 is the lowest, 9 is the highest, but we're just going to focus on 6 to 9. We're going to look at some of the key points in here. So the first thing that it talks about is repetition. Repetition, we can see it here. Yes, so we can see it says repetition is only rare or occasional repetition in this one. So that's the first thing, is how often you're repeating yourself. If you're saying the same thing again and again, and there's a lot of repetition, you're going to get a lower mark for this. Whereas if you're not repeating yourself so much, you'll get a higher mark. And again, self-correction. So that's where you're making a mistake and then you're correcting yourself. So again, if you're not doing that, you're going to get higher marks. Another thing that it talks about in these is hesitation. Here we can see it again, hesitation. So hesitation, that's how long you wait before you say something. Usually while you're thinking of the vocabulary or the grammar to say it. So the less time you hesitate, the higher mark you'll get for fluency and coherence. Again, here we can see it's hesitation and hesitation. Now you can see that the bands are different. So here it says occasional repetition, self-correction and hesitation. And here it says rare repetition or self-correction. And here it says any hesitation is content related rather than words or grammar. So if you're stopping to think of ideas to say, that's okay. But if you're stopping because you can't remember a word or you can't remember some grammar, you're going to get lower marks for this. So then the next thing we want to look at is coherence. And it says here to speak coherently. You can see it here. And to use a range of connectives or discourse markers. Now, these are words, linking words to link your ideas together, like so, but, because, these kinds of things. Another thing it's important to do is to develop your topics fully. You can see that we've got it here. So when we say develop your topics, we mean giving your answer, but also extending that answer, giving examples, explanations, this kind of thing. We're going to look at how to do that in a moment. So let's just summarize. So fluency is connected to repetition, self-correction, and hesitation. And then we've got coherence, which focuses more on developing your ideas logically and using cohesive devices. I'm going to look at these now. So how can we improve your fluency? Well, the truth is there is no quick solution. The main thing is that fluency comes just from practice, from speaking a lot of the time, being more comfortable with vocabulary, grammar, all of these things, and having quick access to it when you need it. Now, it's a very slow and long process getting more comfortable. And if you've just been sitting at a computer studying, but not having the opportunity to speak with people very often, then your fluency probably will be a lot lower. I mean, you have to speak to other people in order to improve your fluency. So it's not easy to give a quick tip to just solve it straight away. It just comes with time. So the key is to try practice speaking every day if you can. I know people don't always have the chance to do that, but if you can, it's important to do so. Now, if you can't speak every day in English, then you should at least try to just speak the day before your exam in only English. Now, this is really useful because what this will do is just put your brain into the correct place. If you're speaking in your language the day before, or even in the morning before the exam, and then you go into the exam and you have to just switch to English, that's really difficult to do. So just one day before the exam and the morning of the exam, just try to speak just in English. It will really help because it'll put your mind in the correct place. Let's look now at coherence, so how we could improve that. Well, one key thing in coherence and cohesion is you need to use explanations and examples to develop your ideas. Just giving short ideas or answers is not enough. We want to develop them and explain to the examiner why we think that or why we feel a certain way. So we're going to look at this in a moment and try to use a variety of cohesive devices or linking words as we mentioned before. And again, we'll look at those. So let's now look at some ways of developing your answers. Now, here's a typical IELTS speaking question. You might get asked, where do you live? And an answer that could be given is in Schwarzenberg in Switzerland. Now, is that a good answer? Well, not really, because if you actually look at it, it doesn't have much English in it at all. It just has 2 prepositions and then the names of 2 places. So you're not giving the examiner anything to judge you on. So we really want to avoid giving this type of very short answer. Let's look at another example. You could say, I live in Schwarzenberg in Switzerland. Now, that's a little bit better. It has a subject and it has a verb. So at least you're showing some grammar, but it's still only present simple and there's not much vocabulary or explanation or anything in there. Well, let's look at this third example. So I live in a town called Schwarzenberg in Switzerland. It's about 40 minutes from Lucerne. It's quite a small town, but it's got some stunning views. Now, we can see that this is much better because it gives the answer, where they live, and it gives some extra information about it. So they say where it is exactly, 40 minutes from Lucerne. And they say it's quite a small town, so they describe the town here and they give a nice description as well. It's got some stunning views. So you've used some nice vocabulary in here. You've given a description of the town and you've said its location. So we're expanding or we're developing our answers further. And this is exactly what we want to be doing. Let's see one more example. So here's another typical question from the speaking. What is the biggest environmental problem in your country? So here's the answer. It says air pollution is a big problem. So many people drive cars to work instead of taking public transport. So the air becomes really polluted. I cycled to work last week and it was really hard to breathe because of all the exhaust fumes. I think it's awful and the government should build more cycle lanes or introduce restrictions on drivers. Now, what I'd like you to do is just have a look at that and answer the question below the video saying how many sentences are contained in that paragraph. Okay, well, it's easy to see sentences because we've got stops here. See, there's 1 there, 2, 3, and there's 1 here. So that's 4 sentences. Now, each sentence is doing something different. And we probably want to have about 3 or 4 sentences per answer. If you're just doing 1 sentence, that's not going to be enough. You don't have to speak for 5-10 minutes about everything. In fact, you shouldn't do that, but 3 or 4 or 5 sentences for each answer is a good aim. Let's look at each of these sentences. So first we have the answer, air pollution is a big problem. That's the answer to the question. If we read the second one, so many people drive cars to work instead of taking public transport, so the air becomes really polluted. Now, that is describing the problem. And you can see it includes some nice vocabulary like polluted and some nice collocations like take public transport. But it's one sentence that's describing the problem or the situation. Then the next sentence says, I cycled to work last week and it was really hard to breathe because of all the exhaust fumes. Now, this is giving a personal example. That's another good way of developing your answers. You can describe them and then you can give an example from your life. And again, it contains some nice vocabulary like hard to breathe and exhaust fumes. Then the final one, it says, I think it's awful and the government should build more cycle lanes to introduce restrictions on drivers. Now, this is giving an opinion, your opinion on it. So those are the 3 kind of things we can do. We can describe, we can give a personal example, and we can give an opinion. We'll look at this more in the next slide. Again, it contains some nice vocabulary. So like introduce restrictions, and yes, the government should build more cycle lanes. So when you develop and extend your answers, you're increasing your mark for coherence, but you're also giving yourself the opportunity to put some nice vocabulary in there and to show some grammar as well. So let's now look at ways of developing your answers. Well, as I just mentioned, you can describe or explain the situation or the problem. Another way is to give an example. Now, that could be a personal example, or it could be an example of something that happened in your country, or it could be a global example. I mean, it can even be something that you've read in a newspaper or that you've seen on TV. Anything like that would be good as an example. Then you can talk about your opinions and about your feelings. Feelings are a great way of adding context and texture to a story or an answer. So if you were angry or you were sad or you were happy, how did you feel? Put that into your answer. It's a really good way of extending them or developing them. So we're going to see some examples here. Let's have a look at this question. It says, what do you do in your free time? Another typical question. Now, here are 3 answers. I enjoy spending time with my friends and going out for dinner. I love playing computer games, and I'm a really big fan of football. Now, those are quite short answers, and we want to try to develop them. And what I'd like you to do is look at the question below the video and try to match them to these 3 examples of describing, give an example, or opinion or feeling. And I'm just going to give you a moment to try to match them up. Okay, let's have a look at these together. So this first one, I enjoy spending time with my friends and going out for dinner. We wanted to describe it. Well, that would match to B here. We could say we usually eat out at least once a week, especially when a new restaurant has opened and we go to check out if the food is any good. So this person is just describing what they do on a regular basis. So they're extended their answer in that way. It's a great way to do it. With number 2, it says, I love playing computer games. Give an example. Well, here we've got it. It says, I'm currently playing a game called Apex Legends, which is so addictive. Last night, I played online with my friends for nearly 3 hours. So they're giving an example of the type of computer game that they like to play. And then the third one, I'm a really big fan of football. Well, that matches up to C. I go to the stadium every week when the team scores a goal. So that's describing. I jump out of my seat and feel absolutely over the moon. So we're talking about feelings. You've got some nice vocabulary here, like over the moon, which means really happy. So you can really see how just by doing one of these 3 things, you can really make your answers much better and more developed. Now let's turn our attention to cohesive devices, which we mentioned earlier. So what are cohesive devices? Well, they're things that connect sentences or ideas together. It could be sentences, it could be paragraphs, it could be a whole text, but there's different types of them. For example, you can use pronouns like he, she, it, us, and them to connect your ideas. So instead of repeating the same thing again and again, like the music festival was really good, the music festival had lots of bands, you could say the music festival was really good, it had lots of bands. So that's one way of connecting by using it, or he or she, those pronouns. Another would be articles like a, an, and the. Especially with the, it refers back to something you've been talking about. So I went to the cinema, the film was really good. So the refers back to the cinema, the film in the cinema. So articles are another type of cohesive device. Demonstratives like this, that, these, and those. This was a great day, that kind of thing. Linking words like and, but, and so are ways of connecting your ideas. You can have quantifiers like some of them, all of them, many of which, a few of which. These also refer back to previous sentences. And then you can use synonyms to connect your ideas together. So if you've used big to talk about something big in one sentence, then you could use the synonym large to refer to it again. Or if you said something about a company, then you could talk about a business in the next sentence, and that would connect your ideas together. So let's have a bit of practice. What I'd like you to do is look at the question below the video and see if you can match these examples here with the types of cohesive device. And I'll give you a bit of time to try that. Okay, well, let's start with this first sentence. So it says, I had a lot of inspirational teachers and I'm still in contact with some of them today. So this is our cohesive device here, and it's actually a pronoun them plus a quantifier together. And we can see how we're saying some of them is referring to some of the inspirational teachers. So it's linking back to the previous sentence, and that's why we call it a cohesive device, because it's connecting your ideas together. So that's one form. Let's look now at this second sentence. We had a great time at the party. The dancing was fun and the meal was very enjoyable. But if you look at this, a great time, fun, and enjoyable, they all have the same or similar meanings. Also, party, dancing, and meal, these are all ideas connected to parties. So we would say this is using vocabulary to connect your ideas together. Or you could say it's using synonyms to connect your ideas together. So having these synonyms going through your speech and your answers is a great way of connecting your ideas together. So this third one, there is a big problem with recycling. The government should do something about it. But there's two things here. You've got the government, which is referring to the government in my country or the government that is responsible for the recycling. Should do something about it. We've got a pronoun here referring to the problem with recycling. So it and the, we've got a pronoun and we've got an article, the, to connect these ideas. Let's now look at number 4. It says, I wasn't very good at sports, still I enjoyed taking part. Well, the key word here is this still. It means but. So I wasn't very good at sports, but I enjoyed taking part. And this still is a linking word. So that's connecting these two sentences together. Then the last one, it says, there's so much more technology everywhere. That's why it is so easy to be distracted nowadays. So we can see this that is referring to something in the previous sentence, and it's a demonstrative. So again, we can see it's saying that, meaning this sentence is why it is so easy to be distracted nowadays. So again, it's connecting one sentence back to another sentence. Now, we can see from this that there's many different ways of linking your sentences, and it's just becoming more familiar with them and improving how you use them. And if you use them in a good way, you're going to get higher mark for your coherence, fluency and coherence part of the speaking test. So let's just have a look specifically at linking words, because these are one of those cohesive devices we just talked about, and they're very, very useful. Now, we can see from this chart that there's three main ways of linking your ideas. We've got and, but, and so. So and to add extra information, but is to show a contrast, and so is to explain the result of something. And most of the time when we're speaking, we want to do one of these three things. Now, there are formal or written versions of and, but, and so, and then there are informal or spoken versions as well. And here we can just see some examples of them. So formal ones would be things like furthermore, moreover, in addition for and, or nevertheless and conversely for but, or as a result, consequently, and therefore. Now, these are good for your writing, but don't use them when you're speaking. If you use them when you're speaking, it will sound very unnatural. So we want to try to avoid them. There are ones that you can use in both. So you're speaking and you're writing, like what's more, as well as, or however, on the other hand, whereas, although, and while. So these are fine. If you want to use them in your speaking, or if you want to use them in your writing, you can do. And then you've got these more informal ones, or these spoken ones, like plus, also, on top of that, what's more. These all mean and. Or still, having said that, that being said, and that means, or which means, and these are all much more used in speaking. So it's important to use the correct type of linking words, because you can lose or gain marks on how you do. So where can you use them? Well, here's an example. It's to connect two parts of one sentence. So here it says, I love football, whereas, or although my brother hates it. So we've used one of these here, although and whereas, which just mean but. So that's connecting two parts of one sentence. Another way would be to connect two different sentences. So you can see there's a stop here. So there's one sentence, and then there's another sentence with another stop. And we've used the word however. So there's two different types of them, some to connect two clauses in one sentence and some to connect two sentences. Okay, well, if you have any questions, remember you can go to the top of the screen and click on the chat icon to send us a message. Now take class 2 on this topic and do the online practice activities and training. Thank you very much for coming to the class. We'll see you again. Goodbye.